Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our hurricane panel. We have a big day ahead of us, a good afternoon, and a lot of information to share with you. Thank you to our panelists for being here. We also have a sponsor today who is here. So we want to thank them and invite them up to say a few words about their company. They are Suncoast One Title and Closing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brett Holler, and I'm the Director of Business Development for Suncoast One Title and Closings. And this is Karen Peterson.
His legs are way longer than mine.
And Karen is our Manatee County manager and one of our closers as well. So we wanted to take the opportunity to go ahead and sponsor a class for you guys, being business partners of Raisem. But this class specifically was very important to us because our company was very impacted by the hurricane last year. A lot of our staff, customers, friends, everyone was very impacted. A lot of our staff still are not living in their homes again. And we thought, what a great class for people to be able to learn anything ahead of time that they could pass along to their customers and anyone that they know to maybe help the hurricane season impact a little bit less. So that's pretty much it. We are in business since 2005, locally owned and operated. We have 6 offices from Punta Gorda to Sarasota. We are about to open up our Manatee County office in the next few months. So we'll be able to serve even farther north. And other than that, we're just happy to be here. And any questions you guys have, we'll be here afterwards. You can get our cards. Oh, right. We are raffling. The most important part, I almost forgot, we're raffling off a bottle of wine. So Jamie's gonna go ahead and get everyone's cards for us. And then we will pick a name. And other than that, thank you very much. And if you have questions, we'll be here for you. And then also our cards are back there and we have snacks for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay. Surprise, surprise, it's mine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yes. It's Peter. We don't need that.
I'm sorry? Oh, they're recording it, so they need to use the mic. Okay. How do I? Okay, I'm going to need some help here. Is it work? Oh, it's working. Good. Good. So, hi. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Pike. I will be the moderator today for this session. We're going to be talking about hurricane preparedness, and we're going to be talking about how it affects you as realtors, as property managers, as people representing buyers or sellers. How does this impact you? What should you be telling your people to be doing? What you should be looking out for, all right? Just a little bit of background. I am a real estate attorney here in Bradenton. I am also the chair this year of Professional Development Committee, and we're putting this on for you. It's part of our property management subcommittee that's doing this. So if there's anything that you would like to let me know about programs that you might like to see or do, please let me know. At this point, I'm going to introduce the panel. I have to apologize. There's a missing person here, Margaret Galuski. She will be here shortly. Unfortunately, she thought this was at the South office. So she'll be here in about 10 or 15 minutes and we'll come in and make a whole big ado and fuss and just pay no attention. Okay, so we have on our panel today, Kevin. And Kevin is from Ascan Adjusters. He is a public adjuster, and he's going to talk about things that you can be telling your customers to be doing, especially if you're in management today, before things happen, to help you with him after things happen. We also have Julia Jones, thank you, I've got right here, who is with PuroClean. And they do water cleanup and restoration. She'll be talking to you about things of that nature. We have Ren Karate from Karate Engineering, who will be able to give you some information about engineering and structural issues that may come up. And at the end is Margaret Galuski. She is our insurance expert. By the way, one thing we would like for you to do is raise your hands and ask questions. All right, this is for you. If there's something specific you need to know, if you need us to get into a little bit more detail, please feel free to do that. So Kevin, why don't you tell us a little about you and your company, and we'll get started that way.
Excellent. Thank you guys very much for having us. So my name is Kevin Downs. I'm with Ask an Adjuster. We are licensed and appointed through the Florida Department of Financial Services as adjusters for the owners, not the insurance companies. Very important to understand that. The state had done a study over a decade ago. What they found is when you guys as Florida property owners have your own adjuster, you average 747% more money than if you simply just wing it and try to deal with it directly with the insurance company. So obviously I would recommend that at least getting an advocate, a public adjuster would be a good start. All right.
Hi, I'm Julia Jones. I'm the owner of Pure Clean. And basically you call us when something's gone horribly wrong. We are we're known as the paramedics of property damage. And we serve Sarasota, Manatee, DeSoto, and Charlotte. And we focus on water, fire, mold, biohazard, and specifically a lot of also in odors. And we were very impacted business-wise in trying to respond to the Hurricane Ian that affected us. And we are, of course, licensed, certified, and insured. And we're probably the only water restoration company in the area that actually has 3 mold certifications. So that is something that does separate us from some of the other in this area. But anyway, I look forward to talking to you guys.
Renato Karate. I am Karate Engineering. We have been in business in this area for 15 years. I've been licensed as a structural engineer here in Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina at a total of 21 years. Predominantly residential. I also do a lot of commercial as well. So commercial I'm familiar with. Predominantly residential design work as well as forensic work. So forensics, fancy term for I go and look at something that's gone wrong and try to figure out how bad is it and give you some remediations as how bad it is. A lot of people focus on the things that are in between or kitchen looks great, your bathroom looks great and whatnot, but none of that matters if your roof fell off your house. So that's where I come in and help you out on the structural end of things. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the most important things I hope that you get from all of this is that you need to have a plan. They're going to talk about some of the things you need to put into your plan, but what do you do when we hear about a hurricane? What happens when the box is up and insurance can't be had? What happens under your contract? Have you read your contract? Do you know what it says? What happens if there's a hurricane? How long you have to be able to put off a closing? Things like that. Start to think ahead and get ahead of the issue so that if something does happen, you're there. And to start us off, I'm going to ask Kevin, what can you recommend that property owners and property managers do to document the property condition before the storm?
It's a great question. Obviously, the preparation begins before the storm, before you have a claim, before you have damage. And so something we had learned 7 years ago after Hurricane Matthew, very few property owners were able to overcome the argument of pre-existing conditions, right? Has everybody ever heard that in the insurance world, right? It's not a good word, right? So you go to file a claim. Next thing you know, you're getting no check, you're getting a denial because of pre-existing conditions. And I would have these boards come in and I say, well, what do you have in your file to prove that this is not pre-existing? They say, Kevin, we don't have anything. We didn't know we needed anything, right? And so 7 years ago, the light bulb went off. And basically what we would recommend, it's something our company does for free as a courtesy, but we recommend getting some sort of a baseline inspection, having an expert, a professional, do a cursory inspection just to certify that as of today, the property's in good condition. We had over 12 large communities after this storm where we had done that. Storm came through. We now had before and after, those claims got paid instantly. There was nothing to argue about, right? And so our firm does those for free. It doesn't have to be us, but somebody should be certifying your property ahead of time before you have a large loss to just ensure you that, hey, you're in good shape today. Anything new must be new. That's my recommendation. We have an example of that here, and it is a free service. And as part of that, we also review your policy as well. So you know exactly what you need to know if you need to use it.
Okay, and Julia, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip over you because this is just too easy for me to skip over to Ren and say, Ren, what about an engineering report? Is that something that homeowners should think about, commercial owners?
Absolutely. If you come across something that is of a concern, you would definitely want to get a structural engineer in it. And so I definitely agree with the idea of getting a check of everything first. I mean, that is so important. A lot of people see buildings and whatnot as stalwart. They don't move, they don't crack, they don't do anything. And if there is some little flaw or something going on with it, they think it's going to fall down in a hole. So it's not the case. These things need to be maintained. They're man-made. They need to be maintained. And so definitely get a precursor check. And then when you come across something that is of a structural nature, definitely want to get an engineer to take a look at it to tell you how severe this thing is. It might be nothing, but it might be something. So you want to put that question to bed, especially before, storms happen.
Okay, and Julia, I know that most of what your company does is post-storm when the waters come in, but is there anything that you can recommend to people that would help them hopefully keep water out, or at least what they should do when water is coming in?
Well, if they see a storm is coming, they need first to make sure they have coverage. Because the property casualty insurance situation here in Florida is in a very, very tough spot. So if you do get water damage, I do highly recommend that you make sure that calling it in really is warranted. So that's one situation. But in terms of ensuring that water doesn't come in, you need to get the pictures in advance, make sure the structure is sound, get the roof secured, because if the roof comes off, it doesn't really matter if the windows are tight. That there's a lot you can do. You can look for areas that have had pre-existing damage and deal with those things that we look for, like baseboards that have gaps in them, like in the corners and stuff. If they've had moisture, that's kind of a really good clue that maybe there was water damage there, because if they do see something, they don't want to pay it. And that's something to be very, be very aware of.
Oh, good. We've got questions. Let me see. Do we need to bring a microphone over to them, or?
I don't mind repeating the question either. I
Just
can repeat
the
it.
question then.
Great question. So we do it now
Could you repeat the
on
question?
annual. So the question was, when should I get this baseline inspection? Obviously, the answer is before something happens, right? So we're into hurricane season, but we have roughly over 90 licensed public adjusters. We're the largest firm in the country. And basically, it's free for us to come out. So if you guys, call us, email us tomorrow and say, hey, here's my property, just come take a look, make sure I'm good. We can usually get out there within a day or two. Doesn't take too long to get there, but it should be done before an event occurs. Typically, we do them on your insurance renewal. So because we're going to renew your policy, we're going to log that info. We're seeing a lot of things changing in the insurance environment. We're seeing policies coming out right and left. Believe it or not, they're not even legally valid. They were just stamped through OIR. And that's a challenge, because when you go to use it, that's going to be a problem, right? And so we want to get out ahead of time. We want to educate you. We want to make you aware of what you're purchasing, what your coverages are, what the pitfalls are, and then certify your property. This way, if something happens, it's not a lot of guesswork. Yes, ma'am. So what we do is we issue something called a certificate of good condition through our company. Basically, it just certifies that we had a team of licensed adjusters out there and we did a cursory inspection, and you guys are in good shape as of today. We're not engineers. We don't charge you for it. I'm not going to forensically inspect your property. I'm going to do a cursory overview. Yep, roof looks good. Windows look good. Exteriors are good. Okay, here's your certificate. This way, if something new occurs, we've got a leg to stand on if they say, oh, this is pre-existing. That's a free service. The state does not allow us to charge for that. Yeah.
Beth, you had a question?
That's a loaded question, right? So you're
Repeat
going to
the
hire a
question.
home inspector.
Hold on, repeat the question.
The question was, would you recommend bringing out your license adjusters when a buyer, I guess, is under contract, right? Is that what you're saying? Or they've already closed? So they're under contract. It's a loaded question, you know, because now you guys are under contract. You've already got a home inspection done. I would say leave well enough alone until you get the closing done. If you guys are picking up what I'm throwing down. Does everybody understand that? Yeah. And then we can come out after. How about that? After the closing is done, you want us to come out, we can certify it then. Hopefully any issues, the home inspector will find them.
Yes.
It's both, and it really just depends on you. So some folks prefer we just focus on the exteriors. It's fast and easy for us. But if you'd like us to go through the inside as well, we carry thermal imaging cameras. We'll look at the plumbing areas, the HVAC and the electrical, and then we're out. We're not a home inspector. It's important to understand that, right? We're not issuing a big home inspection report, nothing like that. We're simply putting you in a position where if you have something happen, it's very difficult for the insurance to say it's pre-existing because license adjusters were there and it wasn't there. Okay.
Can you?
I'm sorry, hold on, because somebody else had a question. Go ahead, Katie. Please use the microphone so that on the recording they get it. No,
And I'll repeat the question as well.
there you go.
Can you explain to us the difference between the good condition inspection and a mitigation inspection that the insurance company does?
Yes, so our cursory inspection is just being performed by licensed public adjusters looking at areas of sensitivity to certify that we were there and we didn't see issues. Mitigation inspections are specific to things like roof strapping, electrical, structural elements that the insurance company is going to use to underwrite the policy. Again, because it's a free service, we're not coming out and forensically inspecting the property. It's important to understand that. We're just doing a cursory inspection with a license adjuster so we can issue you a certificate and say, hey, things were in good shape as of today. And then anything new must be new.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and ask a question actually of Juliet. Sorry, I apologize. How soon should someone call you to remediate after a flood? Or, are there things that they should be doing when it's happening?
If you find that a property has had water damage and it is beyond what you'd be able to do, like if you have a wetback, I'm getting some coaching in the back. If you have a wetback and it's a small space, take care of it yourself. If you need a professional, then you need to have somebody come out immediately because the water causes damage on everything. And the longer it sits, the more that the carpet can have the bacteria, and then that changes things. It can destroy your cabinetry, your drywall, and mold formed within 24 to 48 hours, given the right conditions. Mold really needs like moisture, something to eat, a substrate. It has a lot of different factors, but it can take effect, and it can happen behind drywall, behind wallpaper. It may not be visible. By the time you smell it, then colonies have already formed. So the minute you get it cleaned up, the better it is at the mold mitigation and getting that dry. And part of what we do and what should be done is to dry it. But what we do is we bring out things that create the evaporation effect and have dehumidifiers that will take in what we've evaporated. So that's what our equipment does to lower that. And it takes usually about 3 days. But if you do have a significant water loss, it's very important to get it addressed immediately.
Thanks. And Ren, what about there's a lot of agents here, I'm sure, who work out on the islands. And I'm sure that there are certain things that are of extra concern for people out that way. What would you consider something that they should be especially watchful of?
Oh, out on the islands, let's see here. The islands have wonderful views, but the issues that I come across a lot with properties in the island areas are going to be a lot of corrosion from the saltwater environment. And so that comes into play when you start having events happen. And so if you have a weakened structure because of just being in that type of environment, and then compounded with the hazards that come with either a high wind event or high wind and flood event, you're going to have some serious issues. So those are some of the things that I look for in the area of the islands and out on the coasts, is that kind of accelerated deterioration to building elements. And it doesn't necessarily limit itself to metal. I've seen concrete itself get corroded and just fall off. So again, another important reason to do one of those pre-inspections and just take a look at what you got around.
And I have just one more follow-up, and then you're next, I promise. Ren, you mentioned something about pre-inspections. Now, I'm sure everybody here is totally familiar with all the new rules and regulations regarding inspections of condominiums.
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
say yes, because I've been reading these things and I still don't understand it. But obviously, there are certain inspections that certain condos have to undertake to make sure that structurally they're in good shape. Do you recommend something similar for the two-story structures or even private homes?
Yes, I do, in the grand scheme of things. It's unfortunate it's only limited to condos, but that's because there's a greater loss of life potential in those, as we've seen in the East Coast there. And so the whole idea is to do the inspection. That's the important thing, whether it's called a milestone inspection of whatever, mitigation, whatever. You want to do those inspections because, again, you have a man-made construction and it needs to be maintained. So whether it's a single family or if it's a duplex or fourplex, or when you get to 2 stories, 3 story, it behooves you to go ahead and check it and take a look at what you've got going on, see how things are, faring.
My question's for Ren as well. Does your firm do home inspections?
What we do specifically are specific concerns. So there's 2 different types. There is the general, where there isn't a problem and somebody goes out there looking for problems. And then there's what I do, which is specific, which is somebody's found a problem and nobody's qualified to tell you how bad it is and what you need to do about it. That's where I come in. And so mine is a very specific type of a situation where it's already been found and you need to address it.
Anybody else? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Anything and everything structural.
Could
So
you
anything.
repeat
Oh, location. Sorry. The question was, what locations do I cover? Primarily Manatee, Sarasota counties. I do delve into the Port Charlotte area, and then I do sometimes go into the south area of Pinellas. So those are my areas, the regions local.
Okay. And, that's a good question for Juliet also. What areas does your company cover?
PureClean has an open franchise network, so we are able to respond to opportunities really wherever it makes sense. But where we focus our efforts is Sarasota, Manatee, DeSoto, a little bit of Charlotte, and a little bit of Pinellas. What we want to be concerned with is a lot of our work is a water response, which in our world is an emergency response, and we want to be there within the hour. So I don't commit to things that are really beyond that scope of time, because then we need to visit that location every day to make sure that things are progressing. So we make sure we kind of focus our efforts on areas that we can address in a timely manner.
Thanks. Kevin, I assume you are not geographically challenged, since you can pretty much work from anywhere. Is that correct?
So the areas that we cover is the entire state of Florida, with over 90 licensed adjusters. We have adjusters that live in Pensacola, all the way down to the Florida Keys. Brick and mortar, we have a Tampa office, Orlando, Melbourne, Sebring, and Fort Myers. But again, our adjusters live all over the state. So usually we can get to someone's property within a couple of hours for a free inspection and a free policy review.
Thanks. And Margaret, happy to see you. Why don't you pass that down? Margaret, why don't you just introduce yourself? We made apologies for you already.
Thank
So-
you. Hi, I'm Margaret Galuski, owner of Galazano Insurance in Cape Coral, writing all over Florida, and happy to be here.
And since you're here, we were talking about some things that happened before an event. And as an agent, what parts of the policy should owners be familiar with before the storm hits?
Deductibles. I can't tell you how many phone calls I got from clients of mine saying, thank you for explaining the hurricane deductible because my friends have a 5% deductible. When I see 5%, my head wants to explode.
Would you explain what that means?
Sure. So in Florida, we have a separate hurricane deductible, which is usually 2%, and people get that confused. You know, a lot of times they'll think it's on the damage amount, but it's not. It's on what the dwelling is covered for. So easy way to figure that out. If a house is insured for $100,000, the deductible is $2,000. And then, you know, you go up. So when I see a 5% hurricane deductible, especially on a $1.5 million home, that can be a big out-of-pocket expense that people were not anticipating, and it wasn't explained to them.
Great. Yes.
$1,000 deductible, supposedly for hurricane. Yeah, I had
Okay,
a lot of
could you
those.
just answer, repeat the question because we're recording.
The
So
question
we need
was,
to
what
do
about $1,000 deductible? And I had many clients that had the $1,000 deductible, and it's true, it does exist. It will be harder to find now, but there are companies that are still doing $1,000, 1%. But 5% for the savings versus the out-of-pocket expense, in my opinion, is not worth it.
Terrific. Well, since we're talking about insurance, that gives us a chance to come back to Kevin. I'd say, Kevin, is there anything that you can do to help people when they have these high deductibles, or are you limited only to the actual damages that need to be fixed?
So the way that the claims are adjusted is they're adjusted in what they call a gross loss, meaning from $1. And then let's say that you have damage and your total claim is $25,000 and you have a $5,000 deductible. The first $5,000 would come from you. And then theoretically, they would send you a check for 20. What's important is I see a lot of insureds sign away their claim benefit to a contractor, write them a check for their full deductible, and then miss out on the opportunity to use that deductible towards things that maybe they could take care of themselves. For example, if you lost food in the fridge and you had some benefits for that, you could use your deductible towards that, right? There's no rule that says you have to physically write that deductible check to a contractor specifically. So I would just encourage everybody to be mindful that when you're dealing with a claim, in my opinion, it is better for you to have the funds in hand and pick and choose your contractor at that time versus signing away the full benefit out of the gate and writing a full check for your deductible. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. By the way, just in case you're not aware, that's called an assignment of claim. And there have been a lot of reports of contractors taking advantage of people with these assignments of claim. And I know that the legislature has taken it up. I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm not up to date on that one, whether or not anything has changed. Does anybody here know? Okay, well, do you?
Yeah, I can go over the change real quick.
Go
So,
ahead.
yep, for those of us living in Florida, if you've been paying attention, In the last 24 months, we've had 5 rounds of legislation come out. I want to make sure you guys all let that sink in. 5 rounds of new laws and law changes in 24 months. It's unprecedented. But one of those laws in December, they effectively eliminated what's called an assignment of benefits, right? Now, it will essentially take until the end of this year to fully drop off. But that was a tool that was used by contractors to essentially secure your benefits, step into your shoes as the insured, and then you lose your rights and your say and so forth. It was a bad situation. It's never been a bad tool for people like Julia's company that needs commitment to be paid. But people were using it poorly. Back in the day, it was used because if you didn't have a check and you had water running out of your home, they want to help you, but they want to get paid. The problem is when people were signing blank forms and then taking control of someone's claim and not fixing anything, that's when it became a giant negative. Although the assignment of benefits is effectively eliminated, you still have a lot of contractors essentially signing blank work authorizations, telling folks that, hey, we'll take care of the claim, we'll fix everything. And then unfortunately, you find yourself several months later in a tough spot with very little control over your benefits, your policy, and the adjustment of your loss.
Okay. Juliet, did you have something to go ahead?
The assignment of benefits was basically a proxy where a contractor can take over every decision-making ability of your claim. My understanding is that most of the exploitation was in the roofing industry. We have, just to clarify, since I was specifically referenced, we've never given anyone an assignment of benefits to sign. I think because there is such an opportunity for exploitation that we just won't even go there. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit on the insurance, because the deductibles are so high and every property casualty insurer, as I understand, the carriers share data, having a water loss can negatively affect you. And you may want to really be careful on what you call in if it's not significant, because it may be difficult to find other insurance if they find you have, a water loss, even if it didn't cost them anything like it's below your deductible, it still goes on your record. So I just wanted to kind of recommend if it's a smaller level, like maybe it doesn't touch your 5% deductible, that it may be better just to pay for it out of pocket. Companies like myself come out and we'll do an estimate for free. So you have an idea what you're dealing with. But if it's under deductible or borderline, it may be best to just kind of treat the property casualty insurance for water losses as almost like a major medical versus for every incident. A lot of our homeowners tend to have a water loss and, supply line and a toilet goes out and it, floods the first floor, but it could be fixed inexpensively. That would be the way to go to make sure that you don't call your insurance company until you really know you need it, because it may be tough to find another one.
Yeah. Margaret, I'm sure you have something to add to that, seeing as you and I have discussed this in the past.
So yes, water losses are the new enemy around here. So it's different than hurricane because it's important that I touch on the hurricane deductible is a calendar year deductible. So with my clients in a hurricane, if they have an $8,000 deductible and they had $4,000 worth of damage, I'm telling them to file a claim anyway, because if they don't and we have another storm, then they're starting over. Now, as far as a water loss goes, you are 100% on the money. I just had a client that filed 2 claims back to back. They were under $10,000 and she cannot get coverage now. So if it is something minor, something that is maintenance related and not unexpected, where it's a smaller dollar amount that's maintaining your home. The reality is now I can't even get coverage for people when they have 1 claim if it's over a certain amount.
Thanks.
So.
And Ren, I'm going to come back to you now. And this is for the property managers out there. If somebody's a CAM property manager, they're managing a condominium or something like that. What are some of the weaker areas in these older condos that they should be aware of and make sure that the associations are aware of, that they have to watch out for these things?
Some of the weaker areas that I see when I go out and look at these things are soffit areas. The soffits are either weakened or bent or misshapen or misplaced or whatever. A lot of easy water intrusion there. Another areas are going to be in and around your windows. They're not sealed appropriately or properly, and wind-driven rain could just find its way inside. Some other areas that I see are in your raised patios, upper floor patios and decks that joint in between the deck and the main structure, the interior of the structure. A lot of area for water damage. So those are pretty much the main areas. Some of your buildings, either residential or your condos, it doesn't matter what building size. There's also another area that gets penetrated very easily, and that's the bottom of the wall itself to the first floor. And water just seems to be able to get through there. And so a check of not only the building, but also the grading of the lot. I see a lot of negative grading, water going toward the building. I have no clue why that happens and how that occurs. But in the end, water is getting to the building, and that's just not a good thing. So all of those areas, there's a potential for water to get in, and that's just something that you need to, mitigate when you go and look around the structure.
We have a question in the back. Well, why don't you wait for Kyle? Let Kyle run back there. Yeah, get your steps in.
Sorry, I'm going to put Ren on the spot. What about cracks? Because we get a lot of calls for cracks in walls, cracks, interior cracks, but a lot of those stair step cracks, can water get through those?
Very much so. And thank you very much for that. Cracks in stucco, as well as stucco on block, as well as stucco on wood. Cracks can lead to having water intrusion. And some of that stuff cannot be seen readily visible especially with masonry, because masonry will just soak that up and hold it. Whereas water, you can actually start seeing it bubble wood, you can actually start seeing it bubble and lead to more cracks as the corrosion of the metal underneath occurs. And so, yeah, absolutely. And all of this goes back to what we said earlier, which is take a look at your property, get an assessment of what you have, because some of this stuff like cracks on your walls, if mitigated early, will not pose so much of a problem when the hurricane comes. It's when it actually continues on, gets worse, and then all of a sudden you got yourself a big problem. And it goes back to, was it there first, or was it caused by the hurricane, or whatnot?
Okay, Juliet, that brings us back to you, because now water's coming in during the storm through some of these cracks. How soon should property managers and owners contact you to be able to start remediation?
Well, the first thing we need to do is make sure the storm is passed. Because we can't get out there unless it's safe and the power lines are all secure and that sort of thing. Well, one thing I'd like to get across is when the storm hit, obviously Ian, we had 300 phone calls every day for the first week. So one thing I'd recommend for homeowners is to kind of keep a track of what vendors they may want to look for in advance of the storm season. But if water's coming in and we have 300 phone calls because a hurricane has hit or a storm has hit, then we immediately have to go into triage mode of determining which structure, because people are calling us, they're crying. I mean, they're devastated, they're scared, rightfully so. So we need to triage what's the worst damage that we're hearing about, because that's most critical, because we want people to be able to stay in their homes. And secondarily, because we have so many calls, once we get to the point of triage, then we look at what customers have we worked with that we need to address, because we have to prioritize in some way. But generally, if you have water coming in and it's significant, like you may not be able to stay in the home that evening, you need to call us right away.
Okay, and I've heard rumors, keep the mic. I've heard rumors that commercial properties, large condominiums, those type of companies, they can actually contract ahead of time with a company such as yours or other remediation companies, so that they're at the top of the list. Is that correct?
As Pure Clean offers a damage mitigation kind of inspection, very similar to what Kevin does, except we do go a little bit further in getting information on the insurance company that they work with. You know, where's the proper parking? Where's the water shut off? That way when we take a sketch of the location so that we're familiar walking in. We're not requiring anybody to give us an exclusive. Like if you find at that moment there's some other situation and you want to go with someone else, but at least we have that data so that if you need us, we're already familiar, so we're walking in prepared.
Great, thank you. You have, Margaret, please, go ahead.
For those that don't evacuate for a storm, I just went through this in my own town. We were hit pretty hard by Ian. And a lot of the carriers were trying to say we had flooding damage. I did not evacuate, sadly so. But I had video that we did not have flooding, that it was actually coming in from the top and not from the ground up. So there is a big difference there. And I just wanted to kind of touch on that. Now, that being said, if they advise to evacuate, please evacuate. I wish I did.
Okay. And Ren, actually, I've got one for you here. A lot of homes, a lot of properties have impact-resistant windows. Sometimes people who don't have impact-resistant windows will have shutters, and if they don't have that, they'll put up plywood. What is your take on each of these things?
So I will start with the shocker. Plywood does not work. And it's not just me saying this. This is actually studies out of UF. So Florida Gators, you can thank them for that. It was a long time ago where, you know, shutters were the thing. And even in the building codes, they said you can shutter these things when you don't have impact windows to protect the windows from, you know, breaking even in the storms. And so a couple of crack shot, more than a couple, but a crack shot doctorate students in UF decided to put that to the test. And when they did that, and they found that really any square bigger than 4 foot square doesn't really help. And so you see all these runs on materials and plywood and whatnot to get the storm, you know, to get prepared for the storm. And it doesn't help. So physically, what are you looking at? You got a piece of plywood up there that's kind of pliable. And then you have some windborne debris coming through. And so you get enough force from a tree limb or, you know, a concrete tile from a roof that just fell off and decides to fly, hitting that plywood will bend and touch the window. And if there's enough force, we'll break the window. Now, will debris get through because the plywood's still there? Not necessarily, but I tell you what, water will. Water will. So I'm not a big fan of plywood. So for your windows in your properties, doesn't matter which, that are not impact rated, I would definitely get, you know, certified window protection. And those window protections could be the metal corrugated panels that you see, the plastic corrugated panels that you see. I've seen burlap. We actually had burlap on our house at one time. Burlap cloth, or go straight up to impact resistant windows.
Thanks. Now, I see we have a question, but before you go, I'd like to just make one point here about all of these things. For those of you who are wondering, what do I tell my management companies, or if you are managing homes for rental, for example, when do you need to, or do you need to put up any hurricane shutters or anything else they may have to protect their windows? And the answer to that is, you need to be checking, this should be on your list now, of what does your contract say that you are supposed to be doing for your owner. So if you're managing the property, they live out in Oshkosh and you're renting it out for them, is there something in your management agreement that says you're obligated to put up storm protection? And if so, what is it? Or if you don't have anything in there, are you obligated to even tell your customer at all, gee, there's a storm coming, you might want to consider doing something? And the answer, of course, is if there's nothing in your agreement, well, you're not obligated to do anything. By the same token, that means that after the storm is over, you're going to lose a customer. Okay? Plan ahead. Think about what it is you will need to do. And remember, if you're managing 20 different properties, that's 20 different properties that you just send people out to prepare for. Okay, so go ahead.
Hi, Margaret, this one's for you. When, it used to be called the Clue Report, is it still?
It still is,
And
yes.
is that both for commercial and for residential?
So that's a good question.
Why don't you explain what that is for the people who may
So
not know?
basically what a clue report is, and this is what I want to touch on as well. The claim is now following the owner and the property. So I ran into a situation where there was a claim on the house. It was a sizable water loss. All of the damage was repaired, but the carrier still wouldn't insure it. And now I just recently had an owner, he had 6 hurricane claims at different properties. But because he had more than one, weather-related loss, he wasn't eligible to get a new policy. So this is all getting very challenging for placement where, what was he supposed to do? He owns 6 properties and they all sustained hurricane damage. They're not supposed to be held against you, but this is the new normal now.
So when do you check as an insurance carrier, when do you check those reports so we know whether or not to advise?
I personally like to do it. I tell my clients, here's the rate. If there's no claims, I ask them on quoting, where you live now, do you have any claims that are going to follow you? And then I tell them, do you know if the property you're purchasing had any claims recently? They don't always know that, but that comes up when we get to the application process. And then we find out. And they are attached both to the person and to the property.
Okay, and while you're walking over there, I'm going to ask a question of all of you out there. Does anyone there know whether or not the standard FAR/BAR contract, the standard or as is, addresses the issue of flood insurance? And if so, what does it say? Oh, yeah, actually it does. Because there's language in there about being able to cancel if you can't get flood insurance for your home if you're in a flood zone. So it would, and there's a time limit on that. So it would behoove all of you to make sure that your buyers speak to their insurance carrier as soon as possible to make sure that they're going to be able to get this flood insurance, especially if they're getting a mortgage, because the bank will not lend without that flood insurance in place.
If I could add to that,
Please.
Peter. It's a higher risk flood zone. So you as realtors, please be careful in the language of saying flood zone. Because everybody lives in a flood zone. It just matters if you're in a higher risk A zone that the lender or B zone that the lender will require it. But just because the lender won't require it doesn't mean that that property owner can't flood. And then if they do, and they say, well, I didn't get flood insurance because my realtor told me I didn't need it, you just don't want to be on the other side of that.
Yeah. Yes, please do not be recommending against getting flood insurance ever. If somebody asks you about that, tell them they should speak with their insurance advisor. All right, because as Margaret said, just so you understand, being in a flood zone just means that the experts think that once every 100 years, that property will flood. If you're not in a flood zone, it could mean that once every 300 years or 500 years or 1,000 years, that property will flood. We live literally at, basically at sea level. And as I explain to clients oftentimes, I live in the Himalayas of Florida. My house is 26 feet above sea level. I'm not in a flood zone. I have flood insurance because A, it's cheap enough, and I don't want to take the risk. But it's something that they should all be aware of because we don't know if it's year 1, year 599, 999. We don't know if tomorrow it's going to flood. All right, and just so everybody's aware, remember a few years ago in Texas where that storm just stayed in one place by Houston and flooded out a whole bunch of brand new construction houses? A friend of mine's daughter was one of the owners. These were all brand new, younger people who had big mortgages on these properties, and they were not in a flood zone. Panel, how much does FEMA pay if you are underinsured or you have no insurance when your house is flooded? Usually zero, but I believe the maximum is 30,000. Yes. So basically, they didn't have flood insurance and they lost everything. So be aware of that when people ask you about it. Tell them to go to the experts. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had a question for Margaret. So do I understand you correctly that if there has been a claim filed on a particular property, when that owner goes to sell it and the buyer goes to get insurance on it, they may have a hard time because there's already been claims. So if that is in fact true, as a listing agent, we should be asking that question of our sellers.
I would say so right now in these times, because more information is better than having right up to closing the surprise. I actually had, you sent me someone who was struggling to get insurance because of this very reason. It was a new purchase and
Even if, let's say,
she did.
I don't know,
nothing.
the hot water heater went
Yeah.
out and it flooded the house. And so they filed a claim.
Right.
It's new hot water heater. They fixed everything. And so the potential of not being able to get any insurance on that home because of that claim.
I'm not saying they can't get it. It can be done. I'm saying it limits their choices.
Oh, okay.
And more carriers, once one or two does it, it's almost like a domino effect. You can count on the rest following very soon
Yeah.
after.
And then do I also understand the maximum amount of flood insurance covered is 250,000?
So no, on FEMA, it's 250,000, and I see this all the time. If you have a homeowner, the bank only requires 250,000 and you can get 100,000 on personal property. But then there is what's called excess flood available. And trust me, after what I just witnessed in Ian, I went to Fort Myers Beach. I live in Cape Coral. We witnessed it up close and personal. I would recommend everybody consider an excess flood policy. You can get that up to the limits that the home is insured for.
By the way, I'd like to point out, because you brought up a very good question or started to. Should a listing agent be asking the seller if there has been any flood damage in the past to the house? What do you think? Why? Well, that's what I'm saying. Should you be making sure that they disclose these things and talk to them about it? Why is it on the seller's disclosure? Somebody say Johnson v. Davis, please. Thank you. Remember Johnson v. Davis when you were studying to get your license? That was the law case that says sellers must disclose latent defects that they know of. Well, if we know that if there was a claim previous, that it may be more difficult or more expensive to get flood insurance, isn't that something that a reasonable buyer would want to know about? Okay, usually, so you understand this, when I'm asked questions about Johnson v. Davis, it's usually, well, Peter, we had a roof leak and we fixed it and it's been 2-3 years and we've been through several storms and it's not leaking anymore. Do we need to disclose that we did that? My answer usually is, well, no, I mean, you fixed it. It's not leaking now. You're good. If you just fixed it less than a year ago, my advice always is, of course, you're going to tell them about it. And you're going to show them, hey, look, we got it done by a licensed contractor. We have everything warranted. We're in great shape. Okay. This is a little bit different now. This is not, well, yeah, we had a flood and we cleaned it up and we got rid of all the mold and it's been a couple of years and everything's wonderful. That's great. I don't think you need to disclose that part. But if it's going to cause a problem with insurance, maybe that's something you do need to disclose. Yes. That was for Kevin. Was that for Kevin? Okay, Kevin, I don't know if you heard the question. It's, does the report that you do go on that insurance reporting system?
The baseline, the free baseline inspection that we do is not reported to the insurance company. It does not go on the CLUE report. No, just remains in our database and is available to you if necessary.
And I'm sorry, I didn't see that you had the microphone. Go ahead.
Now, clearly, it sounds so scary with everything going on and all the fraud that we've been having with insurance companies here in Florida. And I know that we've lost a lot of insurance companies due to all the problems. The most important question to me and why I came here is based on all the new legislation going out there, what can we look forward to? So when we're selling people that are moving here from other states, we can give them some hope that there's going to be some relief.
Oh, good.
That's a great question. With the legislation that has recently passed, it is already working, okay? So I just went to a seminar about 2 weeks ago where it was the owner of Slide Insurance who is predicting a very positive outcome in the next 18 to 24 months. Now, what happened after this legislation was passed and the one-way attorney fees went away is that there's been a large uptick and it's what's called mining the old claims. So that is going to take a little while to cycle out, but we're looking at a hardened market for about another 18 to 24 months. And again, that's without any active storm season. So what I tell people, if we have an active storm season, forget everything I just said, because that will set us back. But we are turning the ship. It is going to take some time.
Thank you. And I think somebody else had a question over here.
For Kevin, so regarding the baseline inspection, once someone has it, you say in case a storm or hurricane, will that help to present it to the insurance company and help get the claim through easier and get paid?
Yes, ma'am. So what we see as one of the number one causes of denial is pre-existing conditions. And rarely do we ever meet an owner that has any proof that it's not pre-existing. So we started that program 7 years ago. And after Hurricane Ian and Nicole had come through, we had 12 large communities that we were able to get paid seamlessly because we had the before and after. Yes, ma'am. I could tell them that we were there prior. The insurance companies know us extremely well. 17 years in the business, over $1 billion recovered. So they respect us. And when we present the info, they don't question whether or not we were there.
Great. Okay. Yes.
Again for Kevin. So once the report is completed by you and say you recommend that work be done, then the seller, owner, whomever gets the work done, provides you receipts and proof that the work's been done, then you can give them a clean report? How does that work?
Yes, ma'am. So when we first come out, it's a cursory inspection. If we find some issues, we'll identify them, make you aware of them. You get them fixed, we'll come back and then we'll certify it.
It's all free.
That's a free service. Yes, ma'am.
Sponsors that, the state?
Well, so remember, we're licensed and appointed through the state, through the Florida Department of Financial Services. The only way that we are allowed to be compensated is on a contingency basis if you appoint us as your adjuster to help you recover money from the insurance company. So the baseline program we offer, it's a free service. We're not allowed to charge for it. But what we have found is we have thousands of clients now that when things happen, they call us right away. If they need a hand, that's how we feed our families.
But that is not them assigning their benefits over to you, though.
Correct. No,
That's
ma'am.
different.
Yeah, you don't sign anything with us. You're not hiring us for anything. It's a free service. It's a courtesy. And really, the truth is we want the relationship. You know, I'm born and raised here, 45 years in this state, and I like helping our neighbors. So at the end of the day, we came up with the program to help you guys overcome pre-existing condition arguments.
Okay, and Kevin, perhaps you could explain what a property adjuster, a public adjuster actually does, because it may not be clear to everybody.
Fantastic question. So we're tasked with, well, it really begins with free inspections and free policy reviews, right? But assuming you have a claim and you'd like us to be appointed as your adjuster, you would then appoint us as the adjuster. We would deal directly with the insurance company. We would inspect the property, document the issues, draft the scope of work, build the estimate of costs, and supply that to the insurance. So essentially, we can do all of the work for them. If they'd like to send someone out, we're going to meet them out there. If they request anything, we're going to help provide it. But basically, our goal is to get you paid quickly and fairly, and so you can put your property back together. One thing I do want to mention, we don't perform repairs. So at no time am I going to come in, get you the check, and then turn around and dry out the property and fix the mold or any of that. By law, we have to be on one side of the equation or the other. Either I'm helping you recover the monies or I'm helping you fix your property, but I'm not allowed to do both, if that makes sense.
Okay, and actually I have a question for Ren. Since we're talking about all these pre-inspections and everything, what if people don't get a pre-inspection? Are there things that you can look at? For example, someone has a new pool cage put up before the storm and the pool cage comes off. Are there things that you could possibly look at to try and figure out, hey, you know what? It wasn't installed properly and that's why it came off. While you may not be able to get a claim for one thing, you can go ahead and look to the installer. Don't make a face. That's the client I sent you. I'm
That
trying
is-
to be
that is.
nice to you.
That is the client you sent to me, and I appreciate that.
Yes.
Trying
to play nice here.
I'm going to answer truthfully. I don't want you guys to, or even your owners, to look at something and make that decision on their own, because they might have a degree from Google University and think they know everything, and they don't. And you don't want them to be in that kind of a position where that happens. Now, I personally am in the house of, if they don't have a concern, right? It's their property. If they don't feel like they have a concern, don't call me. Honestly, I tell people that. But if you have a concern and you sit there and you go, hey, look, as you're advising your owners, it doesn't matter, property managers or whatever, you're advising your owners, hey, I think you need to get a professional on this. You've done your job, due diligence, telling them, hey, look, you need to do something. They pull the trigger on, yeah, I should call somebody, or no, this is my property. I don't care. And as far as the pool cage is concerned, in this particular instance, the items that caused that failure were not readily apparent to the visual for anybody to see. It was only after the failure and during my forensic investigation that I was able to find the issues that led to the root cause of what was going on. So you could look at something and it still looked perfectly fine, but then something happens to it. And so you don't want to be in the position of, well, if you think it's okay, it's, don't worry about it. You want to advise your owner, say, look, this is a concern, contact a professional.
And Julia, yes, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about mold again, because that is a problem we have here in Florida. But especially after it rains, why are we so concerned about water with mold? Isn't mold everywhere anyway?
Yes, mold is everywhere. And technically mold is not truly like a public health hazard like asbestos or lead. When we have an air assessor's report, because we do remediation, we don't do the air assessing. The first thing they do is they get a count of the mold outside and compare it to the mold count inside. And how they determine that there's actually a mold concern if there's a big delta. So that's what they look for. And also the reason it's not considered a public health situation in an aggregate sense is because not everyone reacts to mold. Someone can live in a very highly mold environment with where it smells, it's there, and it doesn't affect them. You can have family members, we have 10 people that live in the same house and only one is sick. So it's very tricky to know if it's an allergy or if you have a cold. And that's one of the things that's very important to understand. But if you smell it and you're being affected by it health-wise, that's when you need to bring in an air assessor to evaluate the situation. And if there is a situation, then we're the ones that, what we do is mitigate, the mold and remove it from the environment.
Thank you. We have a question in the back. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jay. I just moved here from Singapore 4 months ago, and this is a very important class for me. I got my realtor certificate, so this is a class that I want to know because of so worried about the hurricane. When we lived in Singapore, I never heard of this thing, but I realized that this is reality here in Florida. And so I have a question to Kevin. So for your certificate of good condition, how long will it normally take when the adjuster come to the house? It's like a half an hour walkthrough or just?
Yep. So the question was, how long does it take for us to do the free baseline inspection?
Correct.
And really it depends on the property. So, we handle residential, commercial. If it's an average single family home, the exteriors are maybe 30 minutes and then the interiors are maybe another 15 minutes. If it's a large condo community, it might be 26 buildings, that's a different scenario. It might take us a day or two. But again, it's important to understand it's a cursory inspection. We're not forensically trying to find every minute little issue you could possibly have. We just want to be able to show that we were there, things were in good condition the day we were there, meaning anything new must be new.
So when you say that certificate is gonna give to the client right away or have to wait for you go back?
Yep, we take it back to our corporate office, which is in Melbourne. And then it's usually sent out same day or within 24 hours electronically. We'll send it over to you. And then we house the data. If anything ever happens in the future, you can just give us a ring. We house the data. We're happy to help you. And then if you actually need us to step in and be appointed as your adjuster, we help level the playing field, help the insurance understand what you actually need, and then get you those funds.
And second question is, will your scope include like a power generator? I have no idea what's a function with power generator. I don't know how to make that work, how to connect with it. So when you do the walkthrough, will you teach the client to how to do that, or everybody already know?
It's a great question. The truth is a majority of all of our team, we do what we do because we like helping people. So you never know who you're going to get. Some of our guys are electricians. Some of them are contractors, so but to be honest, we wouldn't specifically be sending someone out to teach you how to use your generator per se. But we obviously give tons of advice all the time because we're in the business of helping people.
Thank you. And the last one, I promise. How can I get everyone follow your contact?
I think that's a
You-
great
you can-
question. We'll
you can-
provide all that before we leave today.
You can absolutely come up afterwards and everybody will be more than happy to give you their cards. Oh, and it's on the back of the pamphlet. You want to run over there? Hold on. Here comes Kai.
By the time it gets here, I forget the question. On the baseline inspection, I had a couple questions and so when the inspection is done, so let's say someone has several properties. So if you find something, you recommend for it to be fixed or done. What if the person says, I can't right now, I don't have the money to do it? Is that okay? Or so then you don't provide the certificate of good condition, correct?
So the question was, what do we do if we find an issue that we advise you on and you choose not to fix it? The answer is yes, we wouldn't be able to issue the certificate. But whenever you get it fixed, just give us a ring and then we would come back.
Okay.
Yeah, the information is not reported anywhere. We don't have a duty to anyone. This is a free service. It's a courtesy service. And we do it purely to benefit you, not to hurt you.
And the certificate, I assume, is good for a year. So you recommend this every year?
We tend to do them annually. When you renew your insurance, we're seeing a lot of changes in these policies, a lot of things people are completely unaware of. And so we like to do them annually when you renew. We like to also review your policy for free as well. Remember, from our perspective, is it Margaret? Is that right? Margaret. So Margaret sells the policies. Her job is to help you guys manage the risk, right? And typically she probably hears, hey, I want the least expensive, right? But sometimes, the cheapest isn't always the best, but her job is to try to educate and guide you on how to manage that risk and insure against it. But when it's time to actually recover money from that policy, that's what we do. Does that make sense? Okay.
I have a quick question. I had two different clients in the span of about 2 years, the last couple of years. One of them purchased the home. They moved here from California, and within 7-8 months, they get a call. They call me to ask me for a new insurance company. Apparently, their insurance company just canceled them, and they contact them. Why did you cancel me? They had inspectors, without their knowledge, go to the home. They saw that they had a branch over a roof And rather than giving them the opportunity to repair that or fix it, they just cancel their insurance. Another one, they had a dog in the backyard and it's a dangerous breed. And they canceled over that too as well. Can you, and obviously they have to pay extra insurance now, higher premium. And this is a little bit ridiculous to me, but is this?
So one of the
apparently
first
happening?
questions I ask and people get upset with me, do you have a dog or do you plan on getting a dog? Because animal liability in Florida is not automatic. So yes, if they didn't disclose the dog and somewhere on that application, it's asked. And if they left it off, but usually an inquiry will go out from underwriting to the agent and to the insured, asking for more information about the breed. To go back to the branch overhanging on the property, again, normally there's letters sent out that the agent is notified and that the client is notified, and they usually are given the opportunity to remedy that. And I don't know what happened, but normally that's the protocol that's, followed. I can't speak to, what happened in their actual situation, but I've never seen anybody just canceled without being notified. Hey, we did an exterior inspections are the norm. And also when an insured signs, usually they're authorizing, granting the company permission to come in and see what's inside. And that's a benefit because that saves us all money. They see things that maybe an inspection report won't see. And a lot of what they're looking for when you go look at houses to list houses, this water damage and everything, if they see any corrosion, green pitting, anything, some companies are taking away water loss coverage and they won't cover it until that's remedied. So it is a big deal. Telling the full picture. Also, a lot of homeowners don't realize that if they decide to share their home for certain exposures like Airbnb and VRBO, and they don't tell their carrier, they could be ineligible for coverage. It's a contract. I just got a cancellation today where the company, because the house was vacant and they didn't live in it, that they canceled the policy retro to the inception date because the property is vacant and not occupied. So it's very important to understand this is a contract. I'm sorry. It's not supposed to be vacant. If you're signing that you're going to live in it or you're going to occupy it seasonally, but when it's left vacant and it's not occupied and that was the intended use, then they have the right to go back on the application and they return their premium and everything. And now they were canceled for misrepresentation and try to find insurance after that.
And I'd like to just point out, especially for the property managers out there, if you're dealing with the landscaper, please make sure that the landscaper is aware that anytime any foliage is touching the building, that they need to cut it back, because that's a real issue for all insurance carriers. I learned that the hard way, and I've had to cut back some stuff, and you just have to make sure you do that. Yeah, you have a question.
Yeah, for Margaret, just real quick, when you said about the additional flood insurance policy, were you saying XS, like extra
Excess
small or S?
I'm sorry,
S
excess
like
flood.
in- Okay.
So it's in addition to the underlying flood policy. You can't just go buy an excess flood policy without reaching the maximum limits of the primary flood. You have your regular flood insurance. Yes, because a FEMA policy only covers up to 250,000 for the building. And that's all they'll give. Now there are excess, EXCESS, excess flood. So.
Yes.
I have to think of it. Rarely will we see the $500 rates anymore. That's probably a different topic for another day, but FEMA just came out with a 2.0 rating system. If you're I'll touch on this really quick. For the people that live in the high-risk flood zones, ask the seller, the listing seller, if they are willing to let the buyer assume their flood policy. With a FEMA policy, they are assumable. We are seeing extreme rate hikes for new flood, the way the rating is. Yeah, Yeah, any of those, any of them.
Or even just,
Even off
just
water.
low-lying property?
Not even low lying. So the way that we used to base the rates on elevation certificates. And now with the new 2.0 rating system, they're going more by proximity to water and other factors. So in the center of the state where there's not as much water, that's where you might see those $500 rates, but no longer here.
Be our job as agents, thank you, pretty much to kind of ask the seller, say, hey, can my buyer assume your flood policy? They have to have it if it's a water. if it's a
They don't always have
canal,
to have it if they don't
whatever.
have a loan. So
If they don't have a loan,
if
right?
they don't have a loan,
So that's what you would recommend now with what's going on?
absolutely.
Right.
It is, because if they assume it, then they're on what's called the glide path. They're still going to go up every year by about 18%. But it's going to be a slower trajectory to that higher rate. So it's going to be 18% a year until they're at what's called at-risk rating. So if we have a house that, let's say, is $8,000 a year, but they assume that $1,800 a year policy, they're going to go up 18% per year until they get to that rate. Like I said, that's probably another class in itself.
Right back.
Well, if you look at the cost to rebuild right now, and you're only covered for 250,000, and I lived Hurricane Ian. I mean, I lived it. This is my, I think, 8th storm, and by far I still have PTSD from it. So I speak from experience, family members who were hit with the flood, friends who were hit with the flood, and clients who lost their homes in the flood. 250,000 can go very quickly and be absorbed very quickly, especially if you're on a barrier island and you have $1 million property. What is $250,000 going to rebuild?
Hi, I know we always get into the insurance issues. I thought what would be interesting, Ren, is a lot of these realtors sell new homes too, and we do a lot of work with new home builders. Could you kind of go over structurally a little bit of the difference now because of the hurricanes, just very briefly with the codes like pilings and maybe tie downs and stuff that the realtors might need to know, a new home versus an older home, and how they're mitigating for the hurricanes, the wind and the rain?
Okay, there's a lot there. Real quick, before I got to that, I wanted to say about the flood. The flood maps and the flood zones are being updated. Manatee County just, like when I say just, about a year and a half ago, updated their lines. This is based off of national. And Sarasota County still hemming and hawing about it, but you could very well have a property that used to be out now that is in. You used to have a property that was in, and now it's even worse. And so if you're dealing in this, you want to research that and make sure that you are in the right zone and you got it right, because your owners themselves might not have that, updated clue. And so you want to make sure that, hey, if this thing is actually in a flood now and a higher flood risk, that you're appropriately covering for it. Bree, what
Brent,
you had.
Before you go any further on that, is there a place that people could look up to find out that information?
Yes, very, very good question. Property appraiser. Property appraiser. When you look up in the property appraiser, you type all that in, that says building. You click on building and it'll tell you all the specifics of the building, including the flood zone that it's in. And I usually consider that to be the most update because that's the one that the government goes into and updates to. As far as the question for Bree and as far as the construction goes, this leads into the 250,000. You got a structure that is considered substantially structurally damaged. You're not building to what it was. You're building to what it needs to be today. And so that 1950s and 1960s home that has very cheap conventional framing roof, because that's how they did it back then, no longer. All those tie downs that they didn't put down there back in the 1950s and 1960s, no longer. And so now that $250,000 is jacked because you have to build to today's codes. And that's just the building itself. If you're in a low-lying, you're always in a low-lying area, but if your structure was originally in a low-lying area, and this is very easy to see, go down Gulf Drive. And you see these structures built in the 50s and 60s that are right there. I mean, the wave, the shore is literally touching the front door. That gets what's called substantially structurally damaged, according to the building code. You've got to build that up. And most of the time, that's not just walls anymore, that's pilings. And that $250,000 goes into maybe one piling. So it's very, very important to know that, you know, these things about, hey, how much am I covered? Do I need to get that excess insurance, a flood policy? Because I could find myself, or your owners, your buyers, or your sellers can find themselves very quickly in a very tight situation where they got damaged, and now the building departments are saying, you got to build to today's codes. And they go, oh, wait a second. So just throwing that in.
Yeah, I'd like to point one other thing out. I don't know if everybody realizes, but we were semi-blessed, I guess, or maybe cursed for many years because we were not paying real cost for our flood insurance. All right. You know, quite frankly, the houses on the barrier islands, the cost for flood insurance there should probably be, well, I'm not going to say what, but it should be substantially higher than it is now, because that's where a lot of the risk is. Those houses can actually be taken out to sea. All right. It sounds horrible. Oh my God, I'm going from $2,000 a year to $25,000 a year, except for the fact that it always should have been 22 or 23,000. All right, we were subsidized for a very long time, and now that has stopped. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these issues. All right, it's just more of a come to reality standpoint of you want to live. You know, I always liked to say dirt is cheap, sand is very expensive. And this is just another expense for people who want to live on sand. That's just how it is. Go ahead, yes.
I just wanted to add on a little bit to what Ren had said, and Margaret may be able to clarify even more. But what he was alluding to is what's called the 50% rule. And if your structure had more damage than 50% of the value of the structure, FEMA will not fix it unless you do get it back completely up to code. And what's been very heartbreaking is there's a lot of people, especially at, I believe, like the Northport and those very heavily hit areas, that can't afford to build their homes back, and they're having to walk away from their homes. And it's an extremely painful situation, because we've gotten called, hey, come and fix it. We're good. We want to do it. And then FEMA's like, no, not so fast. We're not going to fix it unless you get it today's code. And that means elevating it, you know, doing new roofs, the whole thing. And so many people are just walking away from their homes because of that rule.
So I just asked a question for, I don't know, how many people are here from the property management standpoint? Okay, just a couple. Okay. So, you know, with the panel up here, there's a lot of good information for what to do before and after. But as a property manager or as an agent who is trying to talk to them, the insurance question is, where's the money and how do I get the money, right? Being able to ask and get them, having the right conversation with their agent is going to help them in the long run. And so this question I think probably would be best with the public adjuster, and is from an insurance standpoint, but what are the questions about different policy types and how you determine the values and things of that nature that agents or property managers can have with their customers, so that they better understand how they evaluate their own risk and what they're willing to pay for it.
And then you can pass it back.
So a lot of times I am the afterthought of, oh my gosh, I'm closing, we have to get insurance. That's starting to change now, but it's really important to understand that market value is not what we insure for.
So you could be buying a $3 million house and the insurability might be 500,000. Why? Because the house is 1,200 square feet and, you know, you're buying the land you're buying the smallest house on the block. And the same thing goes the other way. Sometimes you could be paying 300,000, but the rebuild value might be 600,000. And the companies give us software to input the features of the property, but that's where we rely on the, you know, the purchaser who's securing the insurance and, you know, the realtor to give us the information. So it's really important to know, like right now, solar is the big thing. Everyone's getting rising bills. Well, did you know that many carriers won't cover solar panels? And if they find out you have them, they're gonna non-renew you. So, or if you do net metering, you could be ineligible. So these are all conversations that we need to have. It goes back to the dog. What's the occupancy? Is there an alarm? Is there a property manager checking the property on a weekly basis? Because if all of this is not disclosed, and all the application for insurances, and you know, Peter will tell you, the public adjuster will tell you, it's a contract. So when these people sign a contract and they say, I'm going to rent out the house annually, but I decided to rent it monthly and I didn't tell my agent, you never want to have your client in the position where a claim is denied because of misrepresentation. And it happens. It happens. So I cannot emphasize the importance now more than ever, especially in the Florida area. People need the insurance agent. They need the advisory of how am I going to cover this risk? And I just cannot emphasize how important it is. Is there a cage? People are asking right now about Citizens. It seems like it's the cheapest, but Citizens doesn't cover cages. It's limited liability, and the potential for a surcharge is, you know, up to 45%. So those are all the hidden factors that people don't really want to talk about because it's boring. And the only time it's not boring is in the event of the loss, whether it's a robbery, a hurricane. You know, we're talking about hurricanes right now, but is theft covered? Vandalism and malicious mischief, ordinance or law. Citizens does not offer that on a rental policy. So when people think they're saving money, they're also compromising coverage. Does that answer the question?
Kevin, did you
I
have
hope.
something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah.
Okay, while that's being passed down, I'd also like to point out to the property managers out there, if you're property managing a condominium association, for example, you also have to be aware that if you're going to cause them to raise their dues by more than 15%, they may have to get buy-in from most of the people living there. So you may also want to be talking to them about the PR that's involved in all of this and making sure everybody's aware of why we need to raise dues so much in order to pay for these things.
Yeah, the other thing I was just going to mention is, you know, it's a delicate dance, and the agent's job is to inform you all extremely well, so you know exactly what you're buying, right? And it's going to be a balance between cost and benefit. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff flying around in the marketplace right now where you will almost never get a single dollar from that policy, right? And that's not good. So you need to be asking questions like, you know, what do I need to know, right? Tell me the things I need to know if I file a claim. For example, are they going to send me a check, or are they going to send their contractors to come fix my home? And I don't know about you guys, but we see nightmare stories of people that buy those policies, right? The insurance company owns the same guys that are now coming to fix it. They work for them. So now they're coming into your home to replace your kitchen. They're coming into your home to replace your roof, right? That's a problem. That's a problem. They're owned by the insurance. They're being directed by the insurance, and you don't have a say. And if it saved you $30, $40, would you have paid $30 or $40 more to get the check and pick your own contractor? Of course you would, every day of the week, right? But you don't know what you don't know. We've had 5 policies in the last 2 days come across. Now, granted, we handle hundreds of claims a month, but we had 5 policies come across in the last 2 days, 0 water damage coverage. I don't even think they're valid for the mortgage company, to be honest. If the mortgage company knew that you were taking an insurance policy that does not cover the #1 most likely cause of loss, they would say, that one doesn't qualify. that's a challenge. That's a challenge. The marketplace is very shaken up. And you guys as a buyer, you need to know exactly what you're getting so that if you go to use it, you can actually get something out of it. Very important.
And Margaret wants to add something, and while it's passing down that way, I want to point out another thing to everybody. Just because an agent tells you something is covered does not mean that it's covered. All right, it's what's in the policy that matters. How do you know if your agent is telling you what you need to know? Same way that I hope that you get most of your business, referrals. You want to make sure if you're referring to someone, it's not because, oh, they sounded like a nice person. It's because you know that they do the right job for your customer. You know that they're going to look for the correct policy that's going to pay at the time payment is needed. Because let's face it, do we really need insurance? No, I don't need insurance. As long as nothing happens to me, what do I care? But then when something happens, I want to make sure that the insurance is going to pay me. And that's really what you're paying for. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Margaret.
I just wanted to touch on the zero water coverage. It really is becoming the new normal, especially in older homes. When a property reaches 30 to 40 years of age, we are seeing carriers either limit it to $10,000 or exclude it altogether. These are conversations we have. Even there's one carrier that recently went to, if the property is over 10 years old, they are limiting it to $10,000 or 5% of the coverage A. So this is where, and they can do a self-inspection, they'll add it back, but they want those pipes perfect. And I see the inspections, I see 4-point inspections on a regular basis. And I see the corrosion and I see all of this. And that's where the education has to come in. Because really, when we're seeing it, is it okay? Yes, but is it more likely to fail? Definitely. They do have a point. The reason it's the most common cause is because the maintenance is lacking. And I can't emphasize that enough. I see people with 40-year-old homes and they're like, nope, I'm not doing it. It might work, but it hasn't been maintained and there is corrosion. And the companies don't want to pay for that. Also, settlement basis is really important. There are some companies on rental properties or what's called a DP3 form that they're covering the structure at actual cash value. Again, this goes back to Kevin, what he was saying. You don't want to find out after you have the loss that you're not covered for replacement cost, or you don't have water loss coverage, or we're starting to see now the roofing schedules. You know, you save a little bit of money, but you know, your roof is going to be depreciated. So these are all conversations that need to be had. And the companies, you know, I quote it and it's kind of hidden. They want us to push that roofing schedule because they don't want to pay replacement cost. It's expensive. So you really want to get a look, like Peter said, you know, why am I paying what I'm paying? What's covered and what's not? Usually there's what's called a checklist of coverage. That's the first thing I go to because that's where the ordinance or law is. That's where all of the important coverages are. And I keep on hitting on ordinance or law because people just don't realize there are some carriers that make it an optional coverage and it shouldn't be. Codes change all the time, as Ren can probably.
Okay. All right, can I go? Okay, thanks. So we all know that it's not an issue until it's an issue, right? I actually manage 3 luxury brokerages here, and one is on one of the island road. And we actually do come across quite often clients that are self-insuring. Oh my gosh, I cringe. You want to talk a little bit about that in regards to the luxury market for me?
Is this in a condo?
Not a condo.
It's a home. And
No,
they're-
multi-million-dollar private residences.
Yeah, I mean, their exposure there is great, specifically, you know, not just their property damage, but if people come on that property, I would hope that they're at least getting a liability policy. So if someone does get hurt, and a lot of times they think, well, I have an umbrella policy. Well, if you're self-insuring that property, the umbrella can't umbrella over anything if they don't have the proper coverage. So I can't advise against that enough. If they're going to completely self-insure, what I usually recommend for those people, I know We are prone to hurricanes, but I see a lot of fires around too. People just don't realize that they are more commonplace than, if it's not happening to them, it's not happening. But they can come up with a solution where they'd at least have property coverage for fire and liability. And if they want to self-insure for the wind, I still don't advise that. But it's really hard to insure a property once it's been without coverage for more than 30 days. So that's why I say at least get something to cover for the property, because if they ever change their mind, now they've had prior coverage, even though it excluded wind, they had property coverage, hazard coverage to cover for that exposure, and then they can get insurance. I'm seeing a lot of people self-insure and then try to get insurance and they don't understand why nobody wants them. This is very real. There's just not a lot of options out there. So by self-insuring, they're really hindering their future insurability.
And by the way, I think you kind of hinted at this. If they're self-insuring and then they try to sell, their buyer's going to have a very difficult time getting it insured as well, because it hasn't been insured in the last 30 days.
It won't hurt their buyer as much because they're not checking for the insurance, only if there's a claim. But it's not a good idea, especially if something does happen. People have ways of looking up if it's not their primary residence. They're just leaving themselves exposed greatly.
Yes.
Back to talking about the policies that are like excluding or not offering the water damage, like from a mortgage company standpoint, when you were saying that like a policy might be submitted, but then it may not work for that particular loan, like what's happening with that? Are they canceling that policy and then like force placing like insurance on them? Like, is that kind of what's, you know what I'm saying? Like if the loan was approved and they close and then they do a review of the policy and find out like, hey, this, isn't going to work. Are
This
they
has been
canceling?
going on now, the limited water, probably the last 8 years. And I was hoping that the mortgage companies would speak up and
stance,
say
sure.
something.
Yeah.
But this has all been approved through the state, and mortgage companies have not squawked to me about limited water.
And if I can speak to that,
And-
I
and
think
we
it
don't
would
bring a
be
lot of limited
very
water. It's just 5
difficult
minutes of.
for for a mortgage company to claim that this policy is not acceptable, because before you close, for those of you who may not realize this, that insurance policy is usually sent over to the lender because they want to see it first. They want to make sure that it's written properly. And if they come back after and said, oops, you're missing something here. Now, can the bank do that? Yeah, why can the bank do that? Because of the golden rule. They have the gold, they make the rules. I don't know how enforceable that might be. But when that policy comes up for renewal, then they can say, okay, now you need to get a policy that does include this. All right, I would be a little more worried about something like that. I don't know that they could get away with force placing unless you did not upgrade your policy on your own when they told you had to.
Yeah, and that was going to be my comment. A majority of the banks are unaware. And then you don't become aware until you go to use it. And then you realize that you have no coverage and you have $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of damage. How does that get fixed? And then you could see how the whole thing starts to unravel. But one suggestion we're making to all the agents, we have tons of agents that are friends. I used to sell insurance, for 5 years before I became a public adjuster. CYA, everything is CYA. If somebody is taking a policy with no water coverage, if I'm the agent, they're going to initial a little something that says, hey, you know what you're getting. Because what we're seeing now, we're going to start to see guys going after the errors and omissions of these agents. There's my understanding, there's cases which make them a fiduciary, which is a dangerous ground for them. So we live in a world of CYA. Just as an agent, if you're placing something, make sure these people sign off. If they're not taking water, if they're going into a right to repair program, if they're taking on a roof deductible. I don't know if you guys are aware, new laws, new roof deductibles flying around above and beyond hurricane, above and beyond all other perils. So there's so many things flying around that even a lot of the agents are struggling to keep up with. CYA is really the best advice we're giving them so that people know exactly what they're getting and they can't blame the agent later.
Who's got the? Who? Okay. Go ahead, you can. Please repeat the question.
Yes, the question is, what is the opinion for the new steel frame construction? I like it. It's a very good, efficient use of building material, lightweight and very strong. You can use metal studs. You can use, actually, there's container homes out there now. I don't know if you guys have seen those as well, but very strong, very resilient. We know those things are strong already. Those container homes themselves, they've been on ships in the middle of the ocean with high waves, a lot of wind, a lot of water, and they survive. And so people are starting to get into those kinds of constructions. And so the specific question on the metal studs, I like. It's a very nice thing. Also, termites don't seem to like eating metal studs for some reason. I don't know. Leaves a metal taste in their mouth or something. But yeah, all of the robust type of construction, you see concrete insulated form type houses. It literally is just Legos with a hollow space in between where you pour a bunch of concrete. They're very robust. They're very well built. And so, yeah, absolutely. If somebody is in the new construction realm and they're considering that, I would definitely point them in that direction.
I'm going to ask oh, hold on. I've got to ask this next follow-up question, if you don't mind, please. Then why are so many of the new apartment buildings that we see being built around here are stick construction?
Oh my gosh, is this a layup question or not? It all has something to do with money. And so they're building it just like with single family residential homes. It's not just these apartment buildings. You see these apartment buildings going up and literally they're being, I can tell you this, I've seen this. They are being held with string, air cables, you know, they're cables, they're tied down. But I've also done forensics in when there's some water damage and these cables are right at the water damage. And so these cables are now responsible for the whole wall. And that one little area has destroyed that area, has destroyed its capability. And so now the whole wall is compromised. So although it's allowed in some instances, it's not advisable to go for the least cost. But, you know, that's something that's been around longer than I've been alive.
Wait, somebody else had, you had a follow-up question. I'm sorry.
Oh, as far as on this, well, I have heard about are you talking residential or commercial? I've heard about the steel homes, and insurance is always kind of slow. I've just found one carrier that has actually added the Tesla roof to their software. So I haven't really seen a whole lot of the steel homes yet. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that question just because I haven't seen it yet. I'm excited to see where it's going to go though, especially if Ren approves it.
So is there somewhere in the insurance policy that's a standard about whether or not a person is able to manage their own repairs as opposed to the insurance company sending their people? Is there somewhere written in there that we should be able to look and see? What is it under?
So usually on the quote, on the policy, or when I give the quote, usually it'll say a preferred contractor, but I always have that conversation. And then yes, it's hidden in the language of the policy as well. They don't exactly make that easy to find. So that's where I, as the agent, you know, I'll usually put that in bold in an email and say, you know, if you go with this, you're going to have to use their contractors. And then there's other carriers that if there's a roof claim, they have a reservation of rights as well. And that's usually in the policy jacket, which puts, you know, if you ever want to go to sleep, just read an insurance policy.
Oh, wait, I think we had a question.
So what I was referring to on that is the glide path, and that is for the FEMA, that's for the FEMA insurance flood policies. You know, I want to be very clear, there are private flood policies that don't follow the same projections. So with the FEMA policies, if you have a home that's say
I just had a house that was brand new, so they can't secure they can't get that glide path because it's a brand new construction. And where that new construction might have been 2,500 a year, that policy was $10,000 a year. Just to prepare you for what is coming. It's here, it's real. The 10,000, I don't know, not the 18%. The 18% applies to the existing FEMA policy holders. And that's where I said if they're selling, that FEMA policy could be assumable. So it will ease the pain of those high flood rates that we're all going to be seeing here.
But understand, it's only going to ease it for a little bit of time. Yes.
So I'm a forms junkie and I totally believe in the CYA, and I always believe like there's a form for that. From an association standpoint, knowing that insurance now is just insanely hectic around here, do you think the association would take a position to get with insurance agents like that and maybe kind of create that form that as a little bit of a basis of a checklist, like kind of the questions we were asking earlier, like excluding water coverage and, maybe just having like a baseline?
When you say the association,
Uh-huh.
to which association are you referring? Are you referring to FER?
Well, I would love to
Or
see the
raise
Florida
'em,
Association,
or-
but probably raise them to start with on.
I
creating
don't think that
okay.
RAISM really would have the authority to do anything like that.
They
And-
couldn't send suggestions up to like a form committee to
Oh,
have forms.
so
reviewed?
send suggestions to the Forms Committee, absolutely.
Yeah,
And if you have suggestions for the Forms Committee,
I'd love it.
I don't know if you are familiar with David Clapp.
No.
He is very active in the association. He was the Realtor of the Year last year. He also is on the Forms Committee at Florida Realtors. So I would suggest, you can certainly get in touch with him. He's the, and just so you know, I mean, and I think I'm allowed to say this, he's the managing broker at Remax Alliance. So he would be able to certainly, and he's always asking for input from anybody about forms.
Being in the business that we're in, we have seen firsthand what these hurricanes can do. And I want to give just a quick synopsis of a client we had. Her name was Jessica, and she was a renter. And she lived in Northport. And when the storm hit, we talk about things being secured. And there was a porta potty on a construction site that floated to her house and dumped its contents in her front yard. And then of course we had wind-driven rain, and then she had flooding coming to her home. And not only her, but many of our customers or clients, neighbors, had this water come into their homes. And the thing that's important for everyone to understand is that's what we call category 3 water. It's in the same category as raw sewage. Because if you think about the water's coming from fertilizer, pets, in this case, a porta potty, it's the worst kind of water. And that's why so much that you go in Northport and you see all their belongings on the curb, because that's all has absorbed this kind of water, and it's scary. What saved her was she's a renter, but she had renter's insurance that covered her contents. And she even had, I think, renter's flood insurance. So she today is still living in a temporary housing that's paid for by her insurance. Her contents that were damaged are going to be repaired, or replaced. So I do recommend, for those that are renting, properties out, that a lot of people that are renting homes or renting apartments may have a false assumption that they are covered under the landlord. And that's something that needs to be clarified. And if they do get coverage, they may find out that they are well taken care of if the worst happens.
And I just want to add to that, if you own a condominium unit, yes, your building is insured through the condominium association, but the 4 walls in are not. So if you don't have your own condo policy, you're going to be having to pay to reinstall new cabinetry, to fix whatever plumbing or electrical within the unit is yours, all the drywall, and all of your own personal property. So it's incredibly important for those people also to have their own policy and to make sure it includes flood. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, my question is for Kevin. What is the cost So should we hire a public adjuster to handle a claim? What is the cost for that? Is it a percentage of the settlement?
Yes, ma'am. So by law, we're appointed through the Florida Department of Financial Services. We're required to work on a contingency basis, and that ranges between 10 and 20%.
Of the
The-
settlement?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'd like to throw a couple of things out there for the property managers so that they're aware of it. So is anybody out there doing short-term rentals? Oh, good. What's your obligation if a storm is coming and you've got people, short-term tenants in that property? What's your obligation to tell the actual people who are there physically? I would strongly recommend that you find out if there is an eviction order, an evacuation order. And if there is, you make sure that they know about it because these people are not from around here. They don't know that you don't go walking into the pond because there may be an alligator. And they don't know that if there's an evacuation order, they need to get out. Do you have any obligation to find them an alternative place to be? It's not in your contract. That's the right answer. You definitely want to be watching what your contracts say. Because do you think that your guest expects that you're going to find them a place? Yes, they do. Yes, just so we're aware. What about, when is it safe to allow them back in? Anybody know? Go ahead, Kevin, you can.
I would say after inspection. Yeah, you, the manager, the owner, somebody on your behalf should certify that the property is safe for habitation.
Yeah, you want to make sure you don't, just because the evacuation order is over and people are allowed to go back, does not mean that that property is safe for humans to be living in. You need to make sure that, yes, Julia's come in and taken care of any water damage that may be there first. You want to make sure that there's nothing that's going to be a danger to those people. Otherwise, who's going to get sued? Not just the homeowner, the property manager too. Yeah, everybody and their mother gets sued when there's a lawsuit. So you know. So these are all important things to be aware of. Now, you mentioned about they have to pull in the furniture and everything. Is that in your agreement? Okay. Do you think they're really going to do it? Okay. But is it in your agreement with the homeowner that you're going to make sure that those things are secured? It should be. That's something you probably want, because what's going to happen if it's not secured? Who's the homeowner going to blame? You bet, the property manager, and you're not going to be managing that property for long. All right. These are all things you need to be thinking about in advance. And if you're not going to be responsible for it, you really want to make sure that your owner is aware that you're not responsible for it. All right. Somebody mentioned, I think Kevin, have them initial different places. All right. It's very important to recognize this. All right. Are there any concierge people out there who do well, okay. You know, people who do concierge for people, you know, the multi-million-dollar houses that people are in only 2 weeks a year, and they watch them the rest of the year. You know, they are obligated to take care of all these things, to make sure that everything is taken care of. Please check your contracts. And if you're not sure, have an attorney check your contracts to see what is it that you're responsible for, what are you not responsible for. And by the way, just because you're not responsible for it, remember, we're all in business here, and our business is a service business. If you don't give good service, even though it says, I'm not doing that for you, they're gone, okay? Just little things to be thinking about. Any other questions from anybody? Oh, we have one more, please.
In the back there, I did bring some hurricane preparedness checklists that you can use, and also some other tips. They're just in the back corner.
Okay, great. By the way, that's a couple of other things that I just would like to make sure everybody's aware of. Don't forget, if a storm is coming, that you need to protect your computers and your backups, okay? You may want to wrap them if you think that the storm is going to hit you and you're not taking it with you, okay? Take care of that and make sure that you have a backup someplace secure so that you don't lose all of your information. Let's see. Communication is key, funds. Oh, always have a plan. It's incredibly important because when you hear the newscaster say, well, we've got a big storm brewing right now and it's, hurricane whatever, and it's coming towards us, that's not the time to start figuring out what the heck do I do? It's not, okay? Most of us have been here a while. Most of us have been through hurricanes, I hope. And the fact is, it's not as scary as it sounds for most of us. As long as you're not in the direct path when it hits, and it hits at a 5, or a 4, usually it's just a lot of rain and a lot of wind, and it's a little scary, and we move on. But just because that's happened before doesn't mean it's going to happen again. Please make sure we all plan for it. By the way, does everybody know what this week is? Tax-free week, yes. All right. Someone, you were asking about generators. You can buy a generator and save some money on taxes. All right. And by the way, before you buy the generator, talk to people in the know about what size you should be getting. All right. One suggestion for people with generators is, does everybody know you can get a plug installed on the box so that you can plug the generator right in there? It doesn't mean that you can run the air conditioning, just so everybody knows, but at least that way you can just flip the switches and be able to use without having to run wires through your whole house. Yes, you need an electrician to do that. We have one question from the back. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I have a question about my neighborhood specifically because everybody's ready to pull their hair out. So we have a combination in our neighborhood of condominiums, townhomes, and single-family residences. The people that bought, myself included, townhomes were told in the very beginning that we need HO6 insurance. I see you. So that's, everyone in the townhomes has HO6 because we have shared walls and roofs and things like that. We just got a brand new roof. And now a lot of people's HO6 individual insurance companies are coming out to inspect, telling us that we're all underinsured. So if this was like 12 months ago when we were coming into last year's hurricane season, what happens in that moment where the entire neighborhood has incorrect insurance?
So I'd have to see your property on the property appraiser, but if it's listed as a single family home or a townhome and you're in an HOA and not a condo association, you should be on an HO3 form. The only way you should be on an HO6 is if you're listed as a condo association, whether you have shared walls or not. I write condo policies that are standalone. They look like villas, but they're classified as a condo, and they can have the HO6 because the association maintains the exterior insurance. And what's happening is, it used to be that those townhomes, yes, the association did maintain for the outer walls and the roof, but then as time went on, they can vote to go any way, and they're not regulated the same way as a condo association is. So there was what's called gaps in coverage. And guess what? Agents and insurance companies were getting sued. So that is why you are now being required to have you should be on an HO3 unless you're legally a condo. And I'm sorry about that. The bylaws, they used to go by the bylaws, but now it has to be a condo association or they're not going to put it on the HO6 form. They used to say, okay, give us a copy of the bylaws, but what was happening is the bylaws can be changed if they're not filed as a condo.
And
So
by the
that's why
way-
you're seeing this.
And by the way, what if it's, and I don't know if you're familiar with an air condo or a land condo. There are condominiums where the units are actually individual homes,
Yes,
but it's a condominium.
I have them.
Okay.
And we insure them as a condo.
Actually, I think you need to look and see who's responsible for the exterior.
The association maintains. all
Okay,
of
well,
it.
yeah, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's the
violating the
owners.
law Because they are legally required to, there's a Florida statute that says that if it's designated a condo, and there's an association, then they are responsible for the outer walls.
Yes, but
Yeah, I have.
not always.
I agree. That's where the association.
By the way, there's one locally that I know of that. Excuse me, no, I'm not going to mention names. I'm sorry.
So I would say, ask the question, what happened?
Oh, I know the answer. The lawyers get rich.
It gets messy is the
Sort it
answer.
out.
It really gets messy. But I guess my question is, did you get the HO3? I mean, what are they covering for? It has changed. We used to, back, if we had copies of bylaws and we got approval, then we could have done it on the HO6. But over the last couple of years, they've really shied away from that and they're requiring HO3 forms or DP3, depending on what the occupancy is.
Well, I'm sorry, Cassie, but I've got to, Cassie, I've got to interrupt for a
talk to
second.
you after.
Yeah, I've got to interrupt. I'm sorry, because I can see by the old clock on the wall that we're out of time. I'd like to say first, thank you to our panel for everything. We've gotten some great things from you. Thank all of you for coming and attending. I appreciate all of that. And hey, who wins the bottle of wine? Don't look. Yeah, oh, now you can look. Yeah.
Okay, the winner is Anna Fernandez with Keller Williams on the water, Sarasota.
Yay. Party at Keller Williams on the water tonight. Okay, if you have any other questions or anything else, please feel free to come up.
I just
I'm
wanted
sure
to-
everybody's got cards to give out if you need them, and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Before everybody gets up, I just want to give a chance for Brett to, he sponsored in the back, just to tell you a little bit about his company.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank everyone again for having us here. I hope you all got to learn a lot from the class. I know I did. Just another note, like from a real estate standpoint, when you guys have buyers, and of course you want to talk to your broker and all of this stuff, but there are actually now riders from the real estate board that allow you the ability to get out of a contract if you're unable to get a certain type of insurance and flood insurance for a certain price. So with everything going on right now, especially with first-time home buyers, if they find out, 24 days into their contract that, now their homeowner's insurance is so high, they're not going to qualify for that monthly payment. It's nice to have that protection in there. So you guys can talk to your broker or anyone at our office. Any of our closers would be happy to walk through any of the addendums to the contract with you all. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today, if this was an interest to you, in November, we don't have the date yet, but in November, we're going to be having another panel discussion on regulations for short-term rentals. So that's a changing kind of sea there going on. So look for that coming up. Also right now, for those of you who are interacting in the commercial world, we have the summer series going on. We have our June class got postponed to September 11th, but there are three, July 31st, September 11th, and then I think there's one right after that. So those are really great. You can see those on the RAISM site. So feel free to take a look at that. But there are a lot of professional development opportunities that are available. We're really trying to provide services or education and opportunities that people are interested in. If you have any suggestions, reach out to anybody on the committee. I'm there. So is Peter. Katie is there. Let us know that what we can do for you so that we can better target it. But thanks everyone for coming.